Hey everyone, and welcome to this video. I'm Glenn, and this is episode 1 of the Compendium painting series. In this episode, I'll be showing how I painted this amber sword. I primed the sword white by using an airbrush. And here are the different paints I used, shown on the banners. Now let's jump right in. First I apply yellow, orange and brown speed paints in a somewhat random manner, creating areas of light and dark. And for the straps I use a mix of green and brown speed paint. Once the speed paint is dry, I add another thin coat to boost saturation. I'm not too worried about precision here, just aiming for a nice coverage with a bit of variation. Next, I begin highlighting the sword using yellow and white, focusing on the edges and the small scratches. I also add texture to the flat areas of the blade using the stippling technique, aiming for a sporadic pattern. If any areas get too bright or mistakes happen, it is easy to backtrack by reapplying speed paint for depth and gradient. For the most part, when adding gradients with speed paint, I use Fire Giant Orange. You will notice a back and forth between adding gradients with speed paint and building up texture throughout this process. In selected areas, I increase the brightness with white. While in other areas I find too dark, I apply a touch of yellow. And follow up with a layer of speed paint to add gradient. Afterwards, I apply texture on top. At this stage, I have added texture and speed paint for gradients multiple times on this blade edge. I apply the same process to the other blade edge, building up the layers and texture. and adding white as a highlight. I then use a thin mix of orange and brown, just a small amount, to add depth and gradient. Next, I add more texture using tones of white and yellow. Here I also decided to build a brighter area, starting with yellow and gradually brightening it up. Then I followed up with Speedpaint to create a nice gradient. Afterwards, I add more texture on top. This is a back and forth process, applying a thin layer of Speedpaint and adding texture. Doing this multiple times creates depth and a textured effect. At this stage, I have applied the process multiple times on both blade edges. Here I add white as a highlight and decide the brightest areas. After a night's sleep, I felt the sword was too bright for the amber look I was going for. To tone this down, I applied a thin layer of brown. As the final touch, I add small dots of brown, and you guessed it, for more texture. This entire process is applied to all the amber areas on the sword. So, to sum it up, I base coated the sword randomly with tones of yellow, orange and brown. I then layered and highlighted it with tones of yellow and white to create texture. I used a bit of Speedpaint for added depth and gradient. Afterwards, I followed up with more texture. The key here is the layering process, going back and forth between Speedpaint layers and added textures. In some areas, this process was applied more than twice. Next I applied a thin layer of brown speed paint for a darker finish and added small dots for extra detail. I used a picture of real amber for reference, aiming to replicate its variety of colors and saturation, as amber can appear both light and dark. And the straps received layers and highlights with tones of green and yellow. Let me know in the comments if you think the sword looks like amber or something else. If you would like to see who wields this sword, you can watch episode 17 of the Oathsworn painting series. I hope you enjoyed the video and perhaps learned something new. If you found this content interesting, you can support me by sharing the video, leaving a like, comment below, and subscribing to the channel. You can also check my other content for more tutorials and painting tips. Thanks for watching, and I hope I will see you in the next video. Have a nice day.